Welcome back to LivAnimated.com. Let's learn something new. I have a very special guest with me today. We've worked together in the past. His name is Quentin Ramsey. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Did I say your name right? You looked at me for a second like, what?
Well, most of the time, you technically say Quentin. But everybody says Quentin, and every time that happens, I kind of just like look as it's like the T doesn't exist.
My bad.
But that's why it's like most people now just like Q. I'm like, all right, fine. Q.
Okay,
Q
Quentin,
it is.
Quentin Ramsey. There you go. My bad. So, if you're new to the show, this is the first episode you're seeing. What we like to do here is talk about what our guest does for a living, how they got there, and then go back in history a little bit and talk about how they got to where they are, so they can be beneficial for people who are probably enthusiasts, or maybe you're already in the industry but you want to change roles. And you may be in the same position where this person has been in their life at one point. So it's all informational and educational. So what we're going to do now is you work at the initiative as a senior level designer. What do you do as a level designer? Like, what does that job entail?
So basically what level designers do, I like this analogy one person told me like a long time ago. Imagine you kind of building a house, right? Is a level designer is like the architect. So it's like, hey, I'm doing the actual illustrational draft of this is what the house is going to look like, and then do the detailed plans. And so it's like, that's what's kind of like the groundwork for everybody to do. But then I'm actually going in there and then doing the work as well. So it's just like to actually translate that into actually physically doing the game is like, I'm responsible for coming up with game mechanics of like, hey, what are players actually going to do in terms of interacting with the world, actually how they're going to engage with enemies. Now there's combat designers that actually go and actually build those enemies, but we all like brainstorm together and actually kind of design those guys. And then taking assets from artists and bringing all those things together to actually make the game experience. It's just like the quick like one-liner is that I am the primary person responsible for the gameplay experience that the player actually takes part in. So it's just like when the game doesn't feel well and things suck, it is primarily the level designer that's messed that up, so.
That's awesome. Do you do the artification as well, or is it more of that blueprint, like here's where the doors are, here's where the halls are and stuff like that?
It's more the blueprint. So, and actually this is a thing that's actually kind of interesting depending on where you work, because like in some places level designers are artists. They actually do no kind of gameplay stuff, and all they do is generate assets, and sometimes it's just called world building and like put those things together. You'll see that sometimes with like MMOs, but it's just like the level designer that I am is more the traditional one, where it's just like we actually gray box the level out with like primitives. Sometimes some would have greater 3D skills, and so it looks more like actual what the level's going to look like, and then the artists come back and do the art on top of that stuff.
That's cool. All right, so let's go back into the past. I think it's the year 2000. We're going to go back to you were at Cinematics Studios?
Cinematic Studios.
Did you know let's maybe want to go back further. Did you know that you wanted to go into games back in 2000, or like when did that start for you? Like, were you a kid when you were like, oh, I love games, I want to go into games?
It's one of those meandering paths that led you into a place. Okay. So I'll go back. We're finna go back a little bit ways. I'll go ahead and
further?
Yeah, right. Just because for the people listening, it's just like I know. At least from when I was growing up, a lot of emphasis was put on like, hey, go to college or do this, do a profession that pays. Not a lot of people are telling you about like, go do your passion, right? And when I grew up in particular, I actually lost my father pretty young, like while I was still in high school. And so during that time, I was kind of like in a weird nebulous state, right? It's just like in one sense, it's like, hey, turn 18, get a job. That's kind of like the last resounding things. Mm-hmm. Actually, the last resounding things is like, I love you. But in terms of like, all right, when I turn 18, I need to be out the house. That's what the father said, but it's like, I don't know what I want to do. It's just like in one sense, I love math. I love science, and I always have been really good at art. And it was just like my father actually put a plan in place. I kid you not. Before he had passed, he had talked to a bunch of my art teachers. And he was just like, hey, this kid loves comic books. He loves to draw. He loves these things. It's just like, if there's any kind of way to get him to do that, that's the route I want him to go. It's like,
that's awesome, man.
He shouldn't be about this. So while I was in school, during this time, it was just like Sega Genesis started coming out and stuff. And I enjoyed playing games, but in my mind, that wasn't a profession, right? It was like some magical elves in Santa's workshop built these things, right? So I was just like, yeah, I guess I'll do something with my art. And my teacher was like, oh yeah, that you can design magazine ads. Cause during that time, like back in the day, there were a lot of more illustrational ads, and then it started transitioning more into photography and stuff, and web pages and things just starting to come online. I'm revealing that I'm pretty old, so.
No, it's all good, man.
So it's just like he was going on there and I'm like, okay, I'll do commercial art. And I was just like, but I'm not the best artist. And he's just like, but he's like, yeah, there's these guys that can do photorealism and stuff, but it's like, you got to extreme concept, like your mind is really good at conceptualizing an idea, right? It's just like some of these guys, they can only draw the photo. You say, draw a dragon, you can draw a dragon and it looks cool. They're like, draw a dragon, and it's like, they'll try to remember something from a fantasy book or some cover and be able to emulate that, but they can't actually generate the idea. And so I was like, all right, commercial art, that's what I wind up doing. Well, and that's why I'm intentionally going around this crazy path to show that it's like not everything is always just straight up like, oh, this is my passion, and you can actually switch over. Well, a friend of mine actually gave me an anime, Macross Plus. As I saw that, and I was like, oh my God.
Was that the first time you saw anime, period?
Yeah, so it was the first time that I saw anime. He gave me 3 things. He gave me Macross Plus, Akira, and then, like Akira was blowing me away. And then Crying Freeman, which that wasn't, like, I was like, whoa, what the heck is this?
I've never even heard of that one.
It's crazy. It's pretty crazy. Okay. I mean, it's good. It's interesting, but it's pretty crazy. But I saw that, and it's like the storytelling and everything, like the storytelling in it, and then just what people were actually able to do with pen and paper intrigued me. And I was like, dude, man, I really want, when I wind up doing that, I want to go ahead and try to get into animation. So, like school had finished. I'm still trying to figure out where I'm going to go. I wind up applying to a couple of different art schools. It's like I got actually talked to by Art Institute of Houston. Like, hey, yeah, you just finish putting your portfolio together. Most likely we can actually get you a scholarship. And I wind up falling for a tech school. That's why I'm going all the way back to the, It's like, it might seem like this is a crazy path, but like, no, I'm actually going back to actually give the listeners some info about like where you choose to go. Right. So it's just like, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to this tech school. Cause like it was Al Collins. It was originally called Al Collins School of Art and Design, and then switched over to Collins College, but anywho, I actually know the story about that, but we ain't gonna dive into that. But, I saw that, and they were just like, oh yeah, we're about graphic design and we're going to do animation. And, I was just like, just come on here. And I'm like, well, sweet. If I really paid attention and actually dived into stuff, it would have been better to just go to Art Institute of Houston. So it's like I wind up choosing to go and do that. And in doing that, I was waiting for my time to go to school. So during the summer, it was like I was working a job, and it was like, I was crazy self-sufficient since 16, but it was like my mom wouldn't buy me games. Like she actually, like the previous Christmas, bought me the Genesis, and then it was just like, oh yeah, now I make money, and then I go saving money, and then I got this extra money that I'm not doing that's for myself. I'm like, man, I'm finna buy games. So I start buying more and more games, right? Then I got hit up with this game, Gunstar Heroes. To this day, I still go back, at least once a year and play that game. Game's freaking awesome, right? So it's like I played it, and I was like, man, dude, if I could sit there and do this would be awesome. I was just like, especially if I could do the trifecta, which is do animations, do comic books, and do games.
So that was the moment when you were like, if I can do this for a living, it'd be the trifecta.
Yeah, it'd be the trifecta. But again, that path like eluded me, right? I didn't really understand where, or like where, how, or anything. And little did I know that the path that I actually got on was eventually going to actually lead me there. So it's just like, I went to Collins, wound up learning about design, and a lot of the stuff I wind up self-teaching me. I had a couple of teachers. That's usually
how you got to do it in this industry, though, self-taught.
Yeah, like a couple of my teachers were good, but in the end, the school in general was not. But it's just like I just had just a good enough amount of teachers to point me in the direction that my design skills were elevating. It's like they got me into Illustrator, they got me into Photoshop. I wind up learning those things, and then got the chance to fool around with animation. But it was like, hey, a certification. I'm like, I don't really know how to do 3D. What can I do with this? And then it's just like, in terms of graphic design at this point, I'm like, well, no, dude, I'm already this close to animation. Well, and it was one of the things I wanted to kick off my bucket list. I want to learn more. So that actually sent me over to UAC, which is the University of Advanced Computer Technology.
Okay.
That was actually accredited during the time with ASU. So then I went there and it's like, no, you got to take math class. You got to do all this stuff. And I'm like, oh.
They tried to get you into the general.
But that was good. That'll let me know that the school was actually accredited. That is like my degree would actually mean something. Because when I went to Collins, it was just trade. And this is a misnomer that most people actually don't really know about, is that, there's multiple ways to get into the industry. It's like, I know some that went through the CS route, got a CS degree, got into games, being either a programmer or a designer. Some went to art
CS,
school.
talking about computer science, right?
Yeah, computer science. Yeah. Some went to art school and became artists and learned traditional media and then switched over, and then same with 3D animation. And there's others that I know that are completely self-taught and, and just got their portfolios together or built mods and then wind up getting in. For me, it was like I went this crazy route of going to graphic design, went to this other school, which got into their multimedia program because like there was the thing that taught graphic design and animation. And I was like, I'm going to get this. And during that time, they just started a game design program. But it's like it wasn't actually available to me because I was already on a different track and I was already deep down. And the crazy thing that happened was while I was in one of my classes, I actually think it was my English class. The actual career guidance counselor comes up in there and is like, hey, there's a game studio out here in Phoenix called Cinematics. They just did a game called Revenant. Well, I actually was still in the process of working on Revenant. They were just like, they're looking to have some interns. They're looking for an artist, animator, designer. And I was like, kind of sitting there. It's like, oh, dude,
you're like, they're looking for me.
That's good. Well, this was the weird thing, right? In one sense, I was like, oh, dude, that would be awesome. But there was a lot of crazy self-doubt about it, right? And it's because during this time, my mind was still very much focused on animation, storytelling. And I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. And then I was like, well, I also want to do games. But I'm like, I don't know squat about game design, man. It's like, I don't know nothing about it. It's like these other kids are going down there. They're in this design class. They're going to take those spots. And I was sitting there, and then a female friend of mine, Juanita, and like funny, her husband actually is in the game industry as well. She turns around and just like, I think you can do it. Why don't you just try to do it? And I was like, well, I can't do the artist thing, and it's just like I'm still learning 3D modeling. We just started, and it's like don't know animation. She's just like, dude, do game design. She's because like, and she's just like, the guy said, design what the game mechanics are. And then design the level and then make a story. And she's like, you tell kick butt stories. It's just like the other two, you play games, you should know how to do it. So I was just like, all right, and it's like I talked to a couple other people and they're like, dude, do it. And so it's just like, I was like, all right, I'm finna sit down, do the work.
That's awesome, man. So wait, your peers inspired you to go ahead and try it and do it.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've heard that so far. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was just like they all kind of pushed me toward like, hey, no, this is something that you want to do. And it's that. And it's like, and talking to my mom, and it's like my family comes from a faith background. She's just like, well, do you feel this is your calling? I'm like, well, I think so. And she's like, well, do the work. So it's just like literally, I took 3 days, and it's like as soon as I got home from school and work, just dive deep on it, wrote
That's
everything up, sent it in, and and I was like, well, we'll see if I get it. And it's just like, and I mean, I'll be straight up honest, I didn't have confidence that I actually was gonna get it. It's like when
nice. So you still had to apply for it. Like they came to the school looking for interns, and teachers didn't just recommend someone. You had to apply.
You had to apply. You like the thing you had to submit. You had to submit one document that specified the character, like who's your character, what's their background story, who they are, how do they interact with the world, what does the world look like, what's the actual character player package, and then what is the thesis around the game.
So you had to do like a whole mock setup of like everything to show them that you understood. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
that's cool.
Yeah, so that's what I had to like put out there. And then, like I said, there was no teacher recommendation. And it's like, and I was like sitting there, and I'll never forget this because this is the funniest thing that ever happened to me while I was in school. Actually, there's other things, but like those things don't count like directly school connected. Was there was one kid in particular in our class who actually was really buddies with the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor during the time in which we were supposed to hear it was all like puffing up his counselor like, oh yeah, I read everybody's stuff, and this is like, you had the best stuff by far. You're totally gonna get it. And I know for the game design one, there was only 2 spots. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, he's sitting there saying that. And, I guess this dude got it. And everybody that's in my class, which this guy's part of my class, we all start that actually apply. We're all like looking in our email. And lo and behold, I like look, and then there's the letter. And I'm like sitting there reading it, and I get to the bottom, and I'm in the middle of like this college campus's computer lab. And so it's just like, there tend to be open floors, hundreds of computers, just jump out of nowhere. Yes. And it was just like funny because I sit there and I'm doing that, and the kid looks and he knows that I did it, and I know he wasn't cheering. And so I know he didn't get it.
Oh, yeah. That's
and I was
crazy.
just like, that kind of sucks. Like I feel bad for him, but in the
That's
same
cool though,
sense,
man. That's
though,
awesome.
it was just
That's
like
awesome.
it was kind of just like, well, hey,
Yeah.
it's this. So, but that actually is not where the road ended. That was just like, hey, that's the first thumbs up, right? Because
Oh, you mean within the applying?
the applying
Okay.
the process, it was just like, hey, yeah, it's just like your test is good.
Yeah.
Now you actually have to interview, and it was actually a real interview. It's like
Was that something they taught you there at school too, like how to interview and so on, or?
I actually learned that surprisingly from Collins and from high school. Actually, more from high school than anything because I went into co-op for a little bit.
Gotcha.
So I kind of was already kind of
Yeah, a little bit of work
prepared.
experience
And I already during this time work, so I kind of knew how to prepare in terms of presenting myself and speaking to the history of work. But design interview is very different than all of that, right? Like there is that, you still have like that same kind of preparation, but it's just like I didn't know to expect, hey, they were going to break down my game design. They were going to ask me questions about the character. They were going to dive deep into a lot of stuff. I was just like, okay, so this is, this is just a regular old interview.
Did they
right?
test you on site or anything? Did they do that with design? Like where they ask you like certain questions you have to like plot it out on a whiteboard or anything?
For this interview, they didn't do any board tests because it was like an internship.
Right. Okay.
And it's like in every place is different, but for this one, they didn't want to doing it. But it was just like I go in there and it was just like, okay, let's talk about your stuff. So they actually asked me like what was my favorite game, and I broke down why it was my favorite game during that time, and what I was playing, which is actually kind of still goes on now. Now it's really funny. But then we actually dived into the actual whole pitch and proposal stuff that I was putting together. And the thing that was funny because it was just like, your design is actually pretty good, pretty interesting, it's pretty out there. That is like, there's nothing out there that's like that. But they're like, but the thing that got me was the character in the story. It was like, and I was just like, well, hey, thank goodness for that strong suit. That was the thing that they were like, yeah, that was the thing that really punched the major stuff stand out. Everybody else was the same old generic thing. I read your thing and it was like, whoa, now I want to play in this world. I want to play this character.
That's awesome.
And then we wind up talking about the design, which is funny because there was like a survival aspect to it, where it's just like, hey, it's like there's it wasn't like full on crazy hunting.
Yeah, but that wasn't a huge genre back in the day.
During the day, there was nothing like that and stuff. And it was kind of funny because the other gentleman who actually got the internship is actually a really good friend of mine till this day. Nice. And you actually worked with him, Justin, Justin Langane. And it was just like, yeah. So he and I were the two kids that got the internship.
That's awesome. So you guys went to the same school?
So we went to the same school, but never interacted at school.
Oh, you
never
just happened afterwards.
All of our whole friendship, everything bloomed
funny.
after and stuff. And so it's just like, but I'm like, that's an interesting tale,
Oh my God.
which is actually just shows you how small the game industry actually is.
It's very
like,
small.
that's the thing most people don't realize. It is very small. It's like, I've been doing this for a while, and there's been a number of times people I worked at from like my first or second job is just like, I crossed paths with them again, like years later. It's like, what the heck?
Yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy. So now you're here at the studio, and you're saying it was a game design level designer. So what's the difference between?
So during that time, it was just straight game design. This is the thing that's kind of interesting. I think maybe like over the years, as like games gotten bigger.
Okay.
It's like people start specializing in things. So it's like I'm still technically just a game designer, but it's just like the thing that I specialize in and like doing the most is level. So it's just like I focus more on that. Just like how, like, take for instance, there's places that have combat designers. They're still designers. They can actually, like, some can build levels, they can do other things, but they actually have a specialized skill of building combat.
So at the time for game design, what are some of the things that you have to do within game design? You mentioned like you work on the overall experience that the player is going to
Yeah,
experience.
so-
But what are some of the things that you have to like build and do, or how do you even start to do that?
Yeah, so it's just like in terms of
Like what programs
I
are
did-
you using at that time too?
So during that time, early on, that was a combination of like using like whatever our engine was, because every place either like uses another company's engine or an engine of their own. So it's that combination of different scripting programs. Take for instance like C++, Lua, Python, proprietary nowadays. A lot of people use Unreal, so then it would be Unreal Blueprint, or just using Unreal altogether. But during that time, it was like way old school. So it was just like people were building their own engines. It's just like you were using Lua or Python to script all the interactions, and then using a 3D package. Most during that time was mostly, actually, it was Alias. It was Alias.
Alias Wavefront.
Yeah, it was Alias
Yeah.
Wavefront,
Yeah.
and I think the other one was like LivAnimated. So
Yeah.
cats were using that, and then it eventually switched over to 3D Studio Max and Maya. So that's the thing that's been
Wow.
pretty crazy. Is just like
Yeah.
to be in the industry and see the evolution of all that stuff.
So what for the game design part though? But what are some of the mechanics and things that you build outside of the level design? Where, like you said,
So-
it's more of a blueprint.
Yeah.
How did you come about creating and building some of the mechanics? Like how did you go about doing that at that time within the Lua and Python and so on?
So at that time is it's kind of like the same methodology that's no different than today. It's just like you start off kind of like, what's your core fantasy, right? It's like, hey, we're gonna do G.I. Joe. It's like I'm laughing because it's like, that's a license. Which earlier in that time, that's a lot of the games were
Right.
freaking licensed.
Like you're just a
games.
soldier, you got
Yeah.
red or blue lasers, so on.
Yeah,
so
so
on.
it's like,
Yeah.
hey, you're a soldier. What do soldiers do? It's like,
Yeah.
well, they shoot, they throw grenades.
Yeah.
It's just like they dive under cover. And so you start thinking, well, that's the fantasy. How do we deliver that fantasy and express that through game mechanics, right? So part of it's like, well, they shoot. Well, then obviously some mechanics is players have to be able to pick up a gun and shoot. Like, is it gonna be, full on aiming, or is it gonna be auto assist? Because you remember, like some things back in the day, the shooting wasn't you really aimed, just like the target reticle would just snap on the person, and then you would just
got to pull the trigger at the right time.
yeah, and that was it. So it's just like, you decide like how is that going to play out? How does the player actually interact with those things? Same with the enemy designs. It's like, hey, most of the things back in those days, I would say the design, depending on what the game was, the design of enemies weren't very sophisticated. And I don't know if like that's actually a good way to call about it, but it's just like you'll be like, oh, it's a shooting game, so all your enemies do is shoot back.
Yeah.
It's like there might be a dude that throws a grenade, but for the most part, all they did was shot back.
Yeah.
Nowadays you see a whole suite of dudes with totally different behavior types.
Right.
that
Like
go
they
on.
dodge, they know how to hide, they know how to
Yeah.
flank. Like
Yeah, and so
AI's gotten better.
Yeah, the AI's gotten better, and that's kind of part of the thing that gets into that initial design. Is like, okay, what's the core thing that you want to do? Is like, if I'm just going to be an enemy, what does the enemy do? How do they interact with the world? And is it even possible? Right. And so it's like you start designing all those things out in terms of this is what the player does. This is the suite of his mechanics. This is how the suite of his mechanics interact with the world. So take, for instance, if I shoot a wall, does it only play a V effect bouncing off, or can I ricochet a bullet off? It's like if we ricochet a bullet off, how do we do that? How is that actually expressed, and what can the player expect from that interactions? So it's going and doing that kind of, I would say, is going and taking something. Actually, this is a good thing. I'll go back to my history. The thing that I learned about, take for instance, graphic design, was how do you make something simple, sophisticated? Right? It's because if you look when normally like graphic design, when something breaks down, is like the design is overly complicated, and then therefore the person doesn't understand what they need to extract from what you're doing. If you're trying to sell a shoe and it's like, I'm looking at two people talking and I can't see their feet, and you're like, oh, look at the story that this is told. It's like, dude, you totally failed. You're trying to sell shoes. If you just sit there and you just zoom in on the shoe, but then the shoe is not lit, or it doesn't look right, or it doesn't communicate what's so special about the shoe, then it fails as well. So you're kind of breaking that down into like, okay, what is the most elegant way that I can present what the functionality and what is the selling point of this thing in the most easily digestible way, right? Same thing with game design. You know, it's just
Gotcha.
you just like
It should speak for itself once you present it instead of being like, no, go left. Okay, go down those steps.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a cool way of looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's the thing, and it's like it's kind of funny is like we actually like look at some of the things, like if we really start breaking down some of the games in which we love, like not even like myself, just anybody, just take some time to look and just like what is the things that actually break you away from the experience. It's like something's not clear, I don't understand what's going on with it, you know. It's like it's overly complicated. It's like it's boring. Why is it boring? It's like because it's not doing anything to engage me, and I don't understand the point of why I'm investing my time in it. There's all these little problems that when you break them down, it's like they're crazy complex problems, but they haven't been digested down to a point of like this is an easy essence for somebody to grab, digest, and be like, okay, like yeah, I get this, and I want to be part of that.
Yeah, I think that's like when you get to play in certain games and not just you get stuck in an area, but they notice that a lot of people get stuck in a certain area. I think that's what you're talking about, right? Like that area, there's a breakdown there that still needs to happen for it to be fun, understandable, instead of the person running in circles and then ultimately going like, okay, I can't play this. I'm stuck. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, and it's just and it's the same even with mechanics. If you break away from just interacting with the thing, it's like, hey, I am supposed to use this gun to shoot. I'll use an example. There was this plasma gun, right? And in order for the plasma gun to actually fire, you had to actually charge it. They never told me that I had to charge the gun. It's just like I get the gun in the middle of a firefight. When I see the enemy use it, the enemy doesn't charge. The enemy just like, boom, shoots me. When I pull the trigger, it's not like you saw an energy ball at the front of the gun like powering up and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's like, okay, now it's finna fire. All it would do was that there was barely this little glow that went down the gun that just showed the gun was going, but there was no buildup. And I'm like, why the freaking heck does this gun not shoot? Does it not have ammo? Then I like looking, the ammo counter says it has 100 bullets in it. And I'm like, what the flip? I don't get this. Like, do I got to use a different button?
Not intuitive.
Yeah. And so that's where I say it's just like, you know, like, hey, what is the simplest way to go about this? You know, it's like designing all the way through the problem, right? So, like I said, it's simplicity. It's like if we think about what are the simple things which people understand about something. It's like, okay, when I charge something, I see a progress charge to that, right? You plug in the car. Well, somebody got like, oh, I don't got an electric car. I don't know. But it's just like, you know, anything that you're plugging in and charging up, the phones, because everybody has a phone. You know, it's like you see your battery. Your battery's icon slowly fills up.
The lightning bolt shows up, showing that it's plugged in. Yeah.
Yep. It's just like, okay, like, yeah, this is a plasma gun. It's like I expect to sit there and fire and shoot plasma, but it got to charge up first before it fires. Then when I hold the button, I should either see a meter on my gun
or start making it rattle and shake and something.
All that stuff to get it through. So it's like people often think game design is about generating ideas. You know, just like my years of experience learned is like it is about generating ideas, but it's the execution of those ideas. And those execution of ideas come down to being able to critically think. How do you make this thing understandable for the end user, not you, right? And then it dives in deeper because once you understand that, then it's like, how do you make that thing fun? Because just because something is intuitive and understandable does not necessarily mean that it's fun. You know, fun is always about like, what is the outcome of the thing? Is like using that same analogy with that gun, right? I sit there, have it. It does all the things to let me know that it charges. But then when I fire and it hits a dude and it just goes, bang, just shocks them, but doesn't do nothing to the guy, I'm gonna be like, that's not fun. I'm sitting there, I'm zapping this dude, and I'm using the entire gun's power, and all he does is just turn around and shoots me in the head with a bullet. You're gonna be like, dude, that's not fun. You know?
That's awesome. Yeah. No, that's good, man. That's good. So, how long was your internship? And was your internship kind of like verbatim to what the job entailed when you actually started working there?
They actually were 1-to-1. So it's just like I would actually say my internship was kind of like a training ground. It was just like I sat there, did the interview, got it, and then, you know, working. I did my internship for maybe about like 2.5 months, and then I actually got hired on full time.
Nice. So was that like right after graduation, or you just started working there while you were still like finishing school or something?
No, so I previously already graduated the other school.
Okay.
And then in terms of the second school I went to, I had left before I graduated.
Okay, so you're like, hey, I got my job. I think I'm just gonna run with this.
Yeah, it was one of those things. I was just like,
it's like draft day.
Yeah, I was like, should I do this? Or should I? I'm like, no, this is just go, because in the end, especially like with the game industry, experience trumps all.
That's true.
You know, it's just like that. And, you know, that's the thing that a lot of people don't know. I didn't know this at the time. It's just like, you know, experience is the thing that's going to get it. That's why, especially now, if you're like young, I encourage you, especially because like there's so many things out there that are free that allows you to make a gain. Nobody can stop you from doing your passion at this point in our generation, right? If you want to make a movie, I've seen people make movies with iPhones. Yep. You know, it's just like, you want to make music, same thing. You want to make games, same thing. There's tons of free. I mean, you can get basically the industry standard, right? Unreal 4 is like the industry standard that people use anywhere, and it's free to everybody.
It just takes time because you're going to have to learn all the different aspects and disciplines. That's the only thing.
Yeah. So it's just like
time investment.
Yep. It's like you really want it. Pull it down, start fooling with it. And as I said, look at stuff, break it down. This is the thing that's just kind of funny, right? Just in terms of just learning about game design or just anything in general, is one is always about the time investment. You only get out of it what you want to put into it. But secondly is giving yourself excuses not why you can't do it, right? It's just like, you want to know, it's like, dude, you've been doing this for a long time. What's your secret? I play games. You know, I play games.
It's good to know what people are doing. It's good to know what's out there, how far someone is taking something, so you can not reinvent the wheel, but go like, oh, let me advance this. Let me make this better. Yeah,
and it's also about, you know, I always tell people is be humble. Mm-hmm. It's like, huh? Why is humble being important? Is when you think that you're at the top of your game and you're better than everybody else, you often don't pay attention to your blind spots. You don't understand what your weaknesses are, and it blinds you to see what people are doing and advancing, right? I've been around several people where they're like, oh, that game sucked. And I'm like, why? And it's like, oh, well, I just didn't like it. That's a totally subjective thing right there, right? Take what you thought was bad, objectively break it down. Well, the controls were bad. Why? Oh, well, they were unresponsive. Why are they unresponsive? Is it due to there's too much going on in the animation?
Is it latency? What
did
you actually play it, or you just got an opinion?
Yep. Because it's like, if you actually dive and do those deep diagnoses, you learn, you become better, right? And so like during that time, you know, especially during that internship, that's what it was about. I was just like, hey, me and Justin, you know, it's like, which is cool. This is a thing too, is early in your career, even when you're not, find a mentor, find a buddy, find people, and, you know, people always talk about diversity. Find diversity of thought, right? Don't just align yourself with people that think the way that you do, that think and look at problems very differently, so you can learn different approaches, different ways to try to tackle something. Right? Because it's like, in that, like, Justin and I, even though we have very similar opinions about certain games, we have very different tastes on certain things, right? So it's just like, and so he would be like, I like this game. Like, well, I didn't like this game. And then it's just like, then we would talk about why. You know, he'd bring like, well, dude, their design was good because they did X, Y, and Z. I'm like, well, yes, I agree that X, Y, and Z is good, but I don't like it because, you know, instead of saying X, Y, and Z, it's just like all the audio cues kept telling me the wrong thing. It's like I was always walking into dead ends because there's all this extra space and lighting leads me to it, when really it's a dead end. There's nothing that informs me that I shouldn't be going that way, and it doesn't feel like I'm discovering anything. It just feels like I'm just banging my head through the wall, you know. And just like, and we're able to sit there and do that back and forth. And it's like, okay, you're like, dude, that's a good note about this. And like, well, hey, you know, it's like, I do like how that mechanic actually is when I think about it, and it's the fact that it's like, it's responsive. It has multiple outputs that come from it. It's like, it's not just like, hey, I'll grab Mario for the example of this. It's just like, hey, I can jump on a dude's head. I can kick off a wall. I can jump and then triple jump and land to a different spot. All of that's just jump. It's like you're just hitting one button, but you're getting all these different outputs that all feel good, right? And so it's looking at all those things and being like, okay, building your mental Rolodex of like, hey, these are different ways to go and think about particular problems and solving them. So
that's pretty awesome. So how many games are you playing like right now? Do you like, it sounds like playing games to you is like reading books. Do you play everything that comes out, or?
So I do play everything comes out, but maybe not immediately. Right. Mm-hmm. And especially it gets harder when you have kids and working. But it's like I always try to squeeze some time. It's like either sometimes during my lunch break at work, or it's like I get home, I sit there and I play with my son. He goes to bed, then I'll sit there and squeeze some time. I cheat on Saturday. I basically wake up early. Yeah. It's like I wake up early and it's like, all right, set my alarm for 7 a.m. so I can play before he wakes up.
That's awesome. That sounds like Christmas.
Yeah. That's back in the day. Yeah. That's how you got to do it, man.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
But so I play like quite a bit of different things. I normally play about like 3 games at a time. There'll be like one game that I'm actually like diving deep on that is like, okay, this is the primary thing that I'm going to. Okay. Then I'm normally playing like 1 or 2 games to give me a different flavor. That is like, okay, this might be maybe something that I want to think about like later on in the future. This is something that's just everybody's talked about and said that is good. And so I want to go ahead and try it. So, it's like it's that. And then I would say like also just play things out of your comfort zone, even if you're not going to enjoy them. Like, so take for instance for myself, I'm not the biggest RTS fan, but I still play them every once in a while because like I just want to understand them. It's like they might have a solve in that space that could help me like later on, so it's just like, and it's just like how,
or even like how the levels and stuff are laid out.
Yeah. And it's like I said, I want to say it was, I don't know if it was Martin Scorsese or if it was somebody else. I'm gonna just give the credit to Scorsese because, but he was talking about films and he was saying the same thing. It's like he just watches a whole bunch of cinema, and he's just like, and he's like, yeah, there's some stuff I don't like, but I learned to appreciate the filmmaking of it, even though I don't like it, right? That's and it's good. The same thing. It's just like you still can extrapolate learnings from it. Right.
Yeah. Or they might have like a single gem within it where you're like, wow, that's crazy how they did that, but everything else is bad.
Yeah. Because I mean, look at it this way, right? This is going to be a movie thing, and then I'll think of one that's in game that kind of relates is Matrix. Matrix is a high action movie, right? But look how it changed cinema, though.
It really did. Yeah. That whole 360
camera, bullet times, different ways of thinking about shooting, like it changed stuff.
They're making another one, right?
Yeah.
I think my thing is, will it still be revolutionary? You think? I would hope that it would be, but I have no idea what they could do. Yeah, like, what are they going to do? That's
the thing. Like, what's the next level? It's just like, like right now, everybody's trying to push de-aging. I'm actually against de-aging, not because I'm an old man.
Yeah. But talking about that Benjamin Button type stuff, but it's better than Benjamin Button. Like, it's almost like the deep fakes, but you can make it.
It's like, because, like the recent movie with Will Smith, they did the
Gemini Man. So that didn't do too well in the box office though.
Things like that's gonna happen, but they're trying to push technology there. Like ours, I think it's like me. It's like I'm very interested in VR because I've been playing a lot of VR games and augmented reality. I'm like, oh, this can be some interesting stuff in the future and actually have interesting design problems that have to be solved.
You see a new Half-Life, Alex?
I have not watched it yet. Everybody told me.
Wait. You just said you're interested in VR and you really play VR. Like, dude, it's awesome.
There is a reason.
Okay. All right. What do you wait for? What is your reason?
So right now, everybody's on the hype train, right? So
but it's Half-Life. I think that train is consistently full.
It's consistently full. But see, that's the thing. Like it's like it's peaked. So everybody like, oh, this is gonna be the greatest thing. And then you look at it and it's like, I'm like, I want it to die a little bit, and then I go so I can actually appreciate it for what it is. That first take, right?
Okay, so you're not on the hype of it yet. 'Cause I think a lot of people were hoping it was gonna be Half-Life 3, obviously.
Yeah, and I understand like really hoping that it's Half-Life 3, but it's just like I look at it this way. That game, this is me. This is my opinion. It's like they're probably not making that game.
I think they like that it's like that hook of like people still want it. People, it's just like the Money Mayweather Pacquiao fight. Everybody's like, oh, we want it. And then like they're like, no, we're not doing it. It's not gonna happen. And then it happened, and then everybody was like, oh my god, and they made a bunch of money. So, but I think they will make it eventually. I think they may just have such crazy ideas that they need future tech. They want to do something that probably doesn't even exist yet. They might have it on paper, but they're like, are we going to be the ones in the forefront to create X so we can make it? Or are we going to wait and see how things, PlayStation 5 and so on, maybe another 5 or 10 years down the line. I think whenever it comes out, if it comes out, it's going to do well. It's going to have it's so talked about. I think it's gonna just do well, and I think they know that, and they're just holding on to it. Like, we don't need to put it out yet,
Yeah, if it was in development, they told us. I would feel similar if there was just like we've been working on it. We got ideas. You know what I'm saying? Like at least throwing some carrots. Like this is a possibility space that we've been thinking about it, but it's just like it's not even in that range.
Yeah, it's
right?
like a conspiracy theory at this point.
Yeah, like, and that's why I look at it. It's like it's not that. And especially given the fact now, right? It's just like okay, we're doing and granted, this thing what they're doing right now could be the footnote to it, right?
Because it could be a part of
it could be like hey, like you know what. The experience because like
mechanics.
When it first came out, it was considered the preeminent example of storytelling in a game, right? So they might be looking at it because that is one of the things like its mechanics and the way that they distribute narrative that they're deciding like, hey, you know what, we are gonna put this out, and then that might be in like okay, we want to take this technology and use it to make the game because we want that whole experience to be VR. I mean, I don't know. I'm speculating off that. But
sounds like you know what you want for Half-Life 3.
But I'm just like, it's been crickets. And I'm just like, if they wanted to, they could have said something by now. So I just think it's fans wish streaming. Yeah,
that's true. Well, hopefully not. And hopefully not all the time it'll be like that. So you went from being at your first studio, Cinematics Studio, and then you went to Edge of Reality. Like, did you have to move for that? Because Edge was in Austin, so you went from...
Yeah, I moved. Okay. Like, during the time, I wound up leaving Cinematics. My mom got sick, and so it's like, hey, I'm going to go down to Texas, and kind of be down there with him because I was like, yeah, I want to be closer to my family. And that was kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to. And so it's like, I wound up doing that. It was a gutsy move.
Yeah.
Because like literally I just like packed up my stuff, shipped to UPS, because that's a good thing when you're in college and shifting over, you don't have it. It's like you're not trying to take furniture, you're not trying to do like I'm sitting in my games.
Oh, so you didn't have like traditional movers and moving, you just was like, I'm just gonna mail it to myself.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah, I just put all my games in a UPS box, sent it out, got me a plane ticket, and I the thing that's funny is like I actually got rid of a lot of my clothes to keep only a small subset of games in my bags. I'm like, I cannot lose these.
So you threw away your clothes to keep your games?
Oh yeah.
That's hilarious.
I had like some import games. I was like, man, I ain't parting with these, man.
That's funny.
So
what was different from being a game designer at Edge of Reality than being a game designer at Cinematrix? I keep thinking I'm gonna say it wrong. Cinematics. Like, what was the difference between being a game designer at both of those studios? Was it the same?
It was.
What did you learn and take away from the first position that made you stay at the next one so long? Because you were here for like 4 years and 8 months as opposed to a year and 9 months.
Oh no, it's actually much longer than that. Yeah, because
did you go? You went and came back. Well, we talking about the first. We talking about the first.
Yeah,
time
I know.
You were there. Okay, so for the first time you were there, what was the takeaway? And then how much different was being a game designer at both places?
So relatively, actually, throughout my career, it is been kind of the same, right? There's only like one experience where I felt like it was different. It's more so each place is you're learning different ways and different techniques to go about something that you might not have known before. It's just like, and that's how I look at it. So it's like Cinematics was the initial thing of like, hey, I can actually do this, right? Mm-hmm. This is like I'm in the industry now, and and I can improve. I can do the work. When I went to Edge, it is just like the next degree, the next stage higher. And now it's just like, okay, you didn't put any games out. Now you're finna learn what it takes to put a game out. And
when you were at the first place, did you come in like in the middle of the production development?
No, so it was like their first game had just finished.
Oh, okay. So
they
came
were
in on the tail
so it was
end.
like
Okay.
so it was like patches and things of that nature, and then like
Gotcha.
hey, we're still getting ready to start a new thing.
Okay.
Right, and then when I left, that new thing obviously wasn't out, and we were just starting, right? We were just getting there. Then when I went over to Edge, it was like okay. You
went from start to finish?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the first game that I worked on. I did there was like from start to finish.
Okay.
Where it's just like, okay, now we're actually going to learn what it really takes to make a game. Because that's the thing, like early on, it's like setup, right? But setup and execution, two totally different things, right? And this is the thing that's funny, and this is the thing that actually finishing a game teaches you. That if you haven't finished a game, you actually really don't understand what are all the things that can actually make a game bad, right? A lot of people just think like, oh, well, the game was just designed badly. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it's the constraints that are put on making the game can make the game bad. It's like, hey, we know all these initial ideas are not good. They're not working. We have no time to make them better. Now the game is bad. The time constraint.
Right.
It has nothing to do about the design. You can't just because like, oh, you know, the design should have been cooler when it started. It's just like I have yet to meet a designer, you know, that is like the first idea is the greatest idea. It's just like it's iterations. You know, it's like you do it. This is pretty good. Keep sharpening, keep sharpening, keep sharpening until it's just like it's there. So finally, precise edge that like cuts into the person's soul. That's like, dude, this thing delivered, just speaks to me and stuff. But it's like you got to take time to be able to actually iterate on this stuff. And it's just like when people don't have that time, you do get a bad game, you know. But you can also get a bad game where you got all the time in the world and it's just badly designed. There's other situations where it's like it comes down to it's like it's badly managed, you know. It's just like, hey, we had all the time in the world, but we ate it up doing all this silly stuff. Now we only have a little bit of time left to make it, and so it's like, and all the background designs are good, but it's just like, hey, yeah, all these designs are awesome, but we can't execute on any of them because we don't got enough time because we ate up all our time. So it's just like there's so many different factors that go into it, right? So that's why it's just like which is funny is like my younger self would throw shade all the time at stuff. It's like, oh man, this game is garbage, man. They didn't know what they were doing. But I didn't know what I was doing. I forget what the bell curve is, where it's like you get a taste of a little bit and you think you were an expert, but really it's just like, man, you like down here.
That's funny.
You know, and that's exactly what it was because I never went through the process of actually making one. I don't understand what like all these different variables are that come in that can actually wreak havoc on a game. You know?
And it's interesting seeing it from the beginning to end because you go through all the brainstorming, you go through just the initial ideas before a GDD is even made. You know, so here's a question. So as a game designer, are you a one-man army? Do you work with a team of game designers? How does that? I mean, I know you said there's combat design, there's level design, game design, also, but for like game design, is that usually a team effort? Yeah, it's a
team. It's a team effort. So it can be a one-man army. There's people that have actually done one-man armies. There's what is it, Owlboy? I think only like 2 people did that game, right? So it's like it can be that, like in the experience of the stuff that I've worked on, because it's always been console PC games and it's just like big teams. It's like you have a team of designers, right? You have a team of designers, team of artists, team of audio, team of programmers, team of HR management. My thing is this, like on all of those, it truly takes a team to make a game. No one man actually makes that, right? Yeah. It's just like it's like for me, all this is a success, because like there's been some stuff that I had that were games I put out that were not, they were successful, but they were not good games. And it's because of time pressure. It's time pressure because it's like just of like what it is, working with a licensor or a number of different things. But the games in which I know that I felt like shined was in all those cases, the teams was just that. They were actually teams. And it wasn't just like, oh, only design cares about the game experience, right? It's like, no, every artist cares about it. Every animator cares about it. Every audio, every engineer, like every single person is just like, no, this is important. It's not just about my little piece of the puzzle, right? It's just like, for myself, it's just like every time, I get feedback from an artist, like for the rest of the team outside of design, I'm happy about that, right? Because what that means is they have they're invested in what we're trying to do together, right? Because the thing is only great by all of us moving. It's just like, I don't care, because how I was saying earlier, right? I was just like, hey, design is about execution. It's about like the simplicity of making something complicated, simple, digestible, and and resonating with the people. Even though idea ideation is part of it, right? Some of the best ideas sometimes don't always come from designers. But, a good designer can take a person's idea, especially if there's a good nugget to it, and it's like, okay, how do I take this to the next level? How do I actually get it to where it's something that goes from conceptual to being manifested into reality, right? And so it's just like, and that's the thing. It's just like, don't get it confused. I always tell like, because I did a talk at one place, like, don't get it confused. It's just like, yes, I'm a designer. Yes, I come up with some of the ideas of the stuff that you're playing, but it's like, I'm not a one man army. It's a team, and not everything comes from me. It's like, there's been times where it's just like, hey, guys sweeping the floor, I shouldn't even say that. It's like, but it's like they're like, like they're part of the team. They work
You're just
every
saying
day.
like ideas can come from anywhere.
Yeah,
like anyone can have something great. Yeah.
Yep. And it's just like, and y'all let me play test, and I really think that you should be able to do this. And it was like, it was like, what? Didn't think about that. That's freaking awesome, man. And take that back there and then execute on it. So it's just like, and then that's the thing, is it's like that for me, that's the part of design that I actually like. It's like, even though
the collaboration,
it's like, it's the collaboration. That's one big part of it. But then there's also the execution of it. It's like, what does it take to actually make this thing freaking awesome? It's awesome, like, this is a good idea, but is that now? There's times where it's like, I've been pitched pitched, it's like in both forms. Like an idea, and it's like, oh, that idea is awesome, and then it comes down to executing it, and it's like, this isn't as great as it seems. And there's been other stuff where I'm just like, that sounds terrible, and then get down there and then execute on it, and it's like, dude, that is freaking amazing. Yeah. So it's just like, and that's why I'm like, hey, it's open. There's sometimes where it's like, you can hear ideas like, that's bad. But normally, even before you go, you can identify the problems that it makes. Like, it's like, oh, this doesn't play right to the game's core fantasy. It's just like, oh, this is bad because, like, technically, how can we do that? Or it's like, oh, dude, it's bad because it breaks everything else in the game. Or it's bad because, like, who wants to actually do that when you just, which is like separate from fantasy. It's like, dude, I'm not going to enjoy doing that. So it's like, and then there's other times where it's just like, you hear something and it's just like, oh dear, like, yeah, that's going to be it. And it's just trying to find out, like, how do you make it land, right?
That's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool. All right, so let's go to your next one. So you went from edge reality to visual games as a game designer. This was on Darksiders one? Okay.
Yeah, it's like we followed each other. It's just like you were at Edge, then you went to Visual, and then I went back to
I think you were at Edge first.
Yeah, I was at Edge first before you.
I think I was there, like, we actually crossed paths. I've heard about you when I first got to Edge because you weren't there. I think you were still at Vigil, and you were coming back to Edge. And they were like, oh, he's going to come back to Edge, And I was like, okay, I've never met this guy. So, but I think we met the second time. So, but when you went to Vigil Games, what was that like? I remember the game that was being worked on, Darksiders, but were you there in the initial conception of it? Because you didn't stay.
Yeah, I was there pretty early on, and I did left pretty early too. And that was, I would say, because like I always talk about, like, and this is a thing that I'll tell people about. In terms of when you think about your career and the things that you go is make sure you communicate with people, right?
What do you mean communicate? When you exit or
no. Oh. Just in general, like when you work. I was talking about, like, the whole thing is like we're a team, right? Is oftentimes when we work on teams, we sometimes, just because of the nature of who we are as people, bottle ourselves up and don't let people see or know, like, if we're having frustration or we feel uncomfortable. And what people don't realize, your perception is your reality, right? Even though in reality, everybody loves you. Like, dude, you're awesome. But if you perceive the fact that it's like, well, people don't think that, I'm doing a good job, that's going to be your reality, right? It doesn't matter what they tell you. It's like, they can come every day and be like, dude, you're great. As long as that is the thing in your mind, then it's that. So I always suggest to people is just like, check your perceptions. And and that was a big learning lesson from there, right? Because when I was there, it's just like, they were like, dude, you're actually bringing value. But I was like, dude, I'm not bringing value to this team. And so it's just like, so I'm just gonna go.
That's what you told yourself?
Yeah.
At Vigil?
Yeah. And so I was like, hey man, I'm gonna take off. And then in the end,
what were you going through? What was in your mind? I don't understand. So yeah, because that doesn't sound like you. Like, there had to be something else going on with you at the time or something, man. That doesn't sound like your personality.
Yeah, it's funny because I get that often because they're like, man, dude, I work with you, man. Do you know, it's just like, man, you're freaking awesome. You always dive in. It was just like, and again, during that time, I was young still, right? So it's like when I went in there, I was doing stuff and I just felt like disconnected. And I give like Joe and all those guys credit because when I told them, and this is the thing, this is like why I say it's like learn, and that's why like now when I tell people, it's like, hey, make sure that you when you're working, is just like really integrate yourself in there, because it's just like if they would have known, take for instance, I always felt like, man, I don't feel like I'm contributing, being part of the team. That was something they would have been a quick lead to be like, hey, yeah, dude,
Yeah.
you know.
They would have been like, yo, come to these meetings, go do this, go do that.
Yeah.
They would have tried to.
Yeah, and
involve you.
I was already in meetings. It's like the pod that I worked on was actually like super dope. It's like, and outside looking in, that's why I say like that perception. Outside looking in, everybody would be like, man, freaking sweet. But internally, you know, I was just like, well, man, that's like this is not right. And actually, it's just my barometer's wrong, right? You know. And it was just like, and then it's like when I went and talked to them as a team, they had no.
They're like, what the hell?
Yeah,
like, where's this coming from?
Yeah, and that really sucks. You know, and I was just like, you know, like everything was already like said and done, because it's like, you know, I was like, well, I have to start, you know, in 2 weeks from now.
So you already had a position lined up. So even though the conversation started to happen, it wasn't like you could go like, oh, okay, cool. This is a good little, you know, powwow moment. You know, all right, cool. I'll change my attitude. You were just like, no, I'm already out of here.
Yeah, and it was like, and I like learn from that point on. I'm like, dude, don't do that. Like if you're not, let people know, right?
Yeah,
because it's just like is if they would have known, then it's just like, if one, by challenging my perception, right? It's like if my perception was correct, then I can then address either what, like if I want to be there, what I'm doing to put myself in that situation. Like, is it that, you know, I'm being a butthole? Is it the fact that I'm not delivering good work? You know, like whatever that factor is, it gives me an opportunity, one, to address it and become better, right? That's what you should always be aiming for. It's like you become better so you can deliver a better product to the fan. Because at the end of the day, that's who you're doing the game for, right? It's just like, I get my own personal satisfaction, but I'm creating something for other people to consume. And it's like, because of that, at the end of the day, they're the ones that have to be satisfied with it, right? I can be sitting there, be proud, tapping myself on the back all day long, but if none of them enjoy it, then what was it for, right? If I want to just sit there and just do it just to pat myself on the back, I don't need to release it. You know, I just go do it at home. Ha, cool. I got another thing done. Just throw it out. It's like when I do a drawing in a sketchbook. You know, it's like, that's for me. That ain't for anybody else.
Interesting. So you went from Edge to Vigil back to Edge. So I guess my question would be like, how did you do that? And then why go backwards? Like, was it the team? Was it because you were there for 4 years and you felt like, man, is that where you actually integrated yourself and you felt more comfortable as opposed to moving on and you're like, oh man, what am I doing? I need to go back there. I really have fun there. Or were you trying to stay local? Like what was going on?
No, like going there, it's just like every place that I worked at has been many ways a good experience. I'm one of those fortunate people to actually kind of have that. Like, every place has bumps here and there, but that's just life, right? It's just like, I've never seen it where somebody's like, hey, there's no problems in the world. You know, it's like, for me, I'm like, I don't want that. You know, it's just like part of those bumps make it like is the thing that actually makes you get better. Right?
Yeah, it makes you grow.
You grow and learn.
It's your challenge is to see like, how are you going to be addressing the issues that come up? Yeah,
and it's like, and for me, all those places, I'm extremely grateful that, one, they opened their doors to me to actually come in, and two, that I was able to make a positive impact on all of those places, and then three, that is just like, they're all like, I wouldn't be where I am or as successful as I am today without each and every one of those, right? They all contribute.
Yeah, I think my question is more like, how do you?
Because
I thought about how people do that, and I've never really been able to like ask someone. So I think it's interesting. Like, how do you leave a place to go somewhere and then go back to the original place you were at? You know what I mean?
It's a couple of things. It's like, I have my 4 P's, right? Number 1 P is people. So it's just like, every place that I worked had really good people. Going back there was just like, this is a family. It's just like, early Edge was just that. Like they are literally like my second family. You know?
Yeah, they're really nice. It was a very nice group of guys.
Yeah, and it's just like and it's like I'm friends with many of them till this day. So it's a family thing to me. So like going back, I was like, oh, and just going back to my family, and we're just gonna continue to do our thing. And it's like, and I've been fortunate to have that experience, like through, like as I said, like throughout my careers, like building those things, and that's why. You know, like looking when I went back, it was like, oh, like, yeah, that's easy. It's like I'm going to work on one, products that I like working on because I like making games, right? And then two is like with people that I actually enjoy building games with, you know? And so it's like, it's not really, it's never been like a step backwards. It's more like a lateral step, right?
Okay.
It's just like, hey, I look at them both equally as just like, I know and understand how I was contributing and fitting in here. I didn't really know there, and that's why I said that it was a mistake, right? Because like,
but how did you go about the first time you were at Edge and you went to Vigil, 4 years and 8 months into Edge of Reality? What was that thing that made you want to start looking, or were you poached, or were someone asking you to like, hey, you should come over here? You know what I mean? Like, what made you leave if things were so good? Just as a general question.
No, the thing is just like. When this is like anything, like when you go and you do something for a certain time, you always need to change it up. For me, I was just like, hey, you know, we've done this thing. It's like, I want to see what it's like somewhere else. I mean,
gotcha.
That's
okay.
how it is. Like, and then
just curiosity then.
It's curiosity, and then you also get interested in like, oh, well, you know, I know they do cool stuff. Everybody knows who Joe Matt is, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, and so, you know, and I think during that time, just early on, he was trying to do Dragonkind, which was very much like, you know, like Zelda inspired. So it's just like, oh, dude, I wonder, you know, now that he's branched out, is he going to do his own thing like that? And so it's like, oh, well, let me go check it out. Because the only way you're going to know is check it out, get hired, and work on the thing.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. That's awesome. So your time of going back to what was familiar, you were there for a year and 6 months, and then you left to go to Renegade Kid. So what was the reason of leaving after going back to? Like, was that more of a project-based type thing, like where you're like, let me go work on this, or because it seems like a lot of work. It seems like a lot of work to go to a place and be like, man, I kind of set down some foundations here. Been here for like almost 5 years. I left from curiosity to be like, what else is out there, you know? And then I go back. But then you leave like after a year and 8 months, or a year and 6 months. Yeah. So like, what was that? What was going on there?
So there's the same thing. Like all my decisions always come around like how am I growing, and you know what's interesting to me during that time.
And it looks like you were a designer as well. Like when you
like
went back the second time instead of game designer. If there's anything you can talk about that too, of like the differences.
There's really no differences there. Like on everything, I could technically just put game designer. Most of the time, when you see a title switch, is mainly because of how that particular company actually states, like,
what the role is.
Yeah, what the role is.
Okay. But yeah, you went to Renegade Kid. That's what we were talking about on that one. Like, what was that one like when you were at Renegade Kid? You were only there for 2 months. Was that more of like, hey, let me see what else is out there? But then when you got there, you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? Or like, what happened?
No, it was a good experience there. It's like, it's something that I'm not privileged to talk about.
Oh, right, because maybe what you worked on they didn't finish, or they still might be working on something.
Yeah, so there's nothing there. But it's like, like I said, it's nothing crazy, but it's just like, it's just one of those things where it's just like things happen that are out of everybody's control. So
yeah. So you had a little bit of a break from October 2008 to January 2009, but you went to Sony Santa Monica, right? That's what that one is. A CEA as a senior designer. How did you go about? You were there for 6 years. How did you go about going into that position? Like, was that something you just applied to? Were you like, oh, I love Sony games? Were they hiring for something big? What was the catalyst for you to be like going from a Renegade Kid? I've never heard of Renegade Kid.
Yeah.
Right. So what made you go from there to being like, I'm making this jump. I want to do this now.
That was Maria, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, so, you know, things that happened at Renegade Kid, and I was kind of like, okay, what am I going to do? You know, and Maria was just kind of just like, well, why don't you shoot for the stars?
Yeah.
You know, she's just like, I'm like, oh, what do you mean? It's just like, 'cause, you know, I was always trying to stay local. And she was just like, why don't you try to see how high you can actually hit, how high you can aim for? And I was just like, okay. So then for all the big companies, I decided to go ahead and apply for it. And I applied to Sony, but I actually did not know I was applying to Sony Santa Monica.
Okay.
It was just like, oh, hey, Sony's looking for.
Where did you think you were applying for?
I didn't.
You just picked Sony, and you thought it was going to be something closer than Santa Monica.
Yeah, because it's like Sony is huge.
Yeah, it's like global.
It's like and they like one of their official thing was just like, hey, it's a designer for here or it's a designer for here, and it didn't specify. So I just applied, and then lo and behold, I wound up finding out that it was like Sony Santa Monica when I was actually getting interviews. Like, whoa.
Yeah. The pinnacle. That's awesome. Wait, that was for God of War, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So, senior designer, what are the takeaways and differences between a senior designer and a game designer? Do you end up getting more responsibilities of mentoring and so on?
Responsibilities. It's just like in animation art and everything, the titles of senior, principal, and all that stuff is correlated to your experiences. It's like it's experience and responsibilities in which you have, right? Mm-hmm. And the things that you're also able and are capable of doing. So it's just because like take for instance, I'm a senior designer, and in a senior designer, I actually have the ability to be a lead in the capacity. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm gonna be a lead of a team because I already have a lead,
right?
But it might mean that it's like, hey, you know what? There's big efforts on stuff that you have to be able to take on.
Yeah.
And so that's why, I go back and always say it's like, keep learning, keep growing. You keep learning, you keep growing so you can expand your capabilities so that when your moment in time comes, it's like you're prepared for that thing, Preparation is the thing that always leads to success.
So true.
So it's like, if I just sat there and it was just like, what, which is a thing that I like, I'm a craftsman. I love doing craft. It's like, somebody like, dude, you can do your own game or you can go and work on this awesome project. And I'm just like, you know what? I think I might just go ahead and take and work on this awesome project. And it's like, what? You're giving up doing your own thing and running your shop? And it's like, because I'm a craftsman. Granted, I can do that, but I understand when you move. I'm jacking this straight from Macross Plus because the line that's stuck from me. So the main character, Samu Dyson, was a fighter pilot. And it's just like, and they're like, dude, why do you keep sabotaging yourself? And it's just because he wanted to stay a pilot. If he kept moving up, it's just like.
Oh, it's like Top Gun too, right?
Yeah, it's like you eventually get pulled over, you become the trainer, right? Or now you get a lead of the stuff, and now you no longer fly.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, dude, I love what I do. This is the part that I actually enjoy the most. It's just like I also enjoy mentoring quite a bit, right? But I can still do that, and I can still mentor. But once I move beyond that echelon, it is like, okay, I am now the 4-star general. I'm not on the battlefield, like going out
you're not in the trenches anymore.
Team.
You're more meetings, more pleasing the higher execs and stuff like that.
Yeah, and for me, it's like I like that, right?
That's cool.
But it's just like in being that though, hey, I might be doing that, but it's everybody understands the experience in which I have, and they're like, hey, dude, if we need you to run this, you should be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that title is there for.
That's awesome. That's very awesome. So, with working on God of War, that was the first title you worked on when you got there, right? Mm-hmm. What was that like? If you can go into any, because that game has already come out, it was critically acclaimed success. I had fun playing the game. So, congrats to you being part of that.
That
team.
Was way. I
know it's a long time ago.
Yeah, because. I would say this.
But I guess this is what I'm getting at. So in that game, there were mechanics and things that happened that changed games. Like you talking about the Matrix, how the Matrix changed film. Like God of War changed a lot of stuff for like how people did contextual animation and paired animations and everything. Yeah. Like it was a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal. But in terms of that stuff, because in there at Sony. I was like I'm a senior designer, but it's like I'm more of a senior level designer. Most of my stuff primarily that was level design, and then they did the title swap to me for me after Ascension actually.
Okay.
But it's just like I still was my primary focus was level because like there where
the levels were great too though.
Yeah. I mean everybody puts in good work. It's like. The guy, like I said, every place I work with phenomenal people. It's like people like, I'm like, no, dude. It's like everybody else. I'm more humbled to be able to like work with them than it's like, look at my junk.
Nice.
But anywho, but it's just like, yeah. So if I were to equate that, it's like going from AAA, well, being in like AAA or AA baseball, then going into the major leagues, right? Or being a development lead of basketball and then getting into the NBA.
Right.
The intensity of the intensity of the demand in which you have, the prestige of like the title, the expectation of everything is all elevated, but also the resources you have available to you to deliver on that level, right? So it's just like, cause it's like you're competing with all the people that are like at the top of their game. You're like Naughty Dogs, Insomniacs, all that stuff. Granted, and up until this point I've always been doing that, but you understand actually I would say it's probably because I just got into F1. I think that analogy now I'll probably say it's like F1 racing, right?
Yeah.
It's like Mercedes, Ferraris, the amount of technology resource they have to make their cars. Their cars are just on another level, right? Everybody's still on somewhat of some sort of even ground, but it comes down to like the chassis, the engine, and what they're doing that actually puts them on the performance to get them across the line.
The greatest speed,
So like, even though all of us are in this F1 race together, there's just the preeminence of the preeminence, and you're trying to figure out the way to get it there. And that's why I said like, yeah, that's actually more of a better, because the separation of the two would say like, oh, the places that I was at before, we were never competing against them, and that's actually not true. We were always competing against them, but it's just like they just have available resources that are different. That's kind of like one of the reasons sometimes you just like, hey, that person was there, and it's like, ew, well, that dude was the guy that made this technology, and it's just like, well, obviously that's why their stuff is so good. Then, so
that's pretty cool, man. So you were there for 6 years. Like, what was that like, being at a place that long? I think that was the longest you were at one place so far.
Continually without.
Did you kind of work through the itch of being like, oh, I wonder what else is out there? Or were you like very content of being like, man, I like where I'm at. Everything is good.
Man, I didn't even think about it. Like, when I was younger, I think I was more sporadic. And even though it's like not sporadic, it's like you're working at a place for 4 years. That's not sporadic. Sporadic or anything. But I just think more so during this time, it's just like as I said, it's like everything's about people. It's just like the people that I worked with is like we're an awesome unit.
Group.
Cool. It's just like, so it's that. It's like I went there every day and it's like, and just enjoying it. And I was just like, hey, but it's like it also came to a point, like later on where it's like, all right, especially like after a kid changes your perspective on a lot of stuff.
Life. Yeah. Life as a whole, yeah.
I was sitting there and just like, okay, this is a good time to shift. So it's like eventually cool. It happened, but it could have not happened. It could have easily chose not to. So
yeah. That's cool. So you went from Sony Santa Monica, shooting for the star. You went to Riot. So that's still, I think that would still be up there. I mean, it's a different project, a different title, different group of players, but it's still, they were on top of their game. But you were there when Riot, I think they were just starting it, right?
No.
At what point? 2015. Where were they at 2015? It wasn't esports yet, right?
No, it
was esports
then.
Because that World Championship stuff is totally different.
They were already 6 years in.
Okay, 6 years in. Wow. Yeah, so they were already. Was it the esports what it is now though? It wasn't what it is now though. Yeah, because what it is now is like huge, like.
No, it was pretty big then. I think when I first started working there is when they did the sold out the Staples Center for the first time.
Okay.
Oh, so actually no, that was a year before. That was actually, I think that was
still pretty early. So,
yeah, it was still pretty early, but they were already around for almost 5-6 years.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, they already got their success then, because I think the first 2 years when they came out, it was and then it just blew up overnight. That's awesome. So senior designer. So what were some of the things that you learned there as a senior designer outside of everywhere else? I mean, it sounded like you said that at Sony Santa Monica, like everything was just on another level. You had an abundance of resources, very smart people who were like pioneers in the industry that you got to work with. So what was the difference when you got to Riot? I think some of the things that Riot just came out with now was like a lot of the think tank games that they plan on releasing in the future, maybe near or distant future. But what was it like being a senior designer in that environment?
this is gonna because people are like, what? Why I say that because like most things, the environment, like the big jump was definitely when I switched from Austin. When I left Austin,
let me see if that.
Yeah,
there we go. Okay.
yeah. When I left Austin to California, right?
Okay.
Because it was like everything's different. It's like you go from like, hey, you know, people in terms of like what you can do is just like you don't have the same amount of resources to where it's like, dude, you got crazy amount of resources. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just like, so it's still in some ways more of the same, but the thing for every place is just how they approach the problems, right? Everybody approaches things different. So in terms of when I'm actually there, I was like, hey, I've learned a totally different way of designing because the spaces are different, right? Because, you know, it's just like
spaces. You mean the projects?
Spaces have been the problems that you're going through. Like if you look, I did mostly single player, and then then switching, and now you're doing multiplayer stuff. That's different problems. Different. You approach those problems totally different, right? So it's just like, and so that's the thing, and it's like, and I got a taste of that working on Ascension, right? It was just like, oh, dude, you know, it's just like this is a totally different way to think about things because, like, yeah, now you're talking about people engaging each other opposed to people engaging AI, you know. And so it's like, and so that's the thing that really is like different, you know. Obviously, I can't dive into specifics.
Of course. But the actual, I think if we keep it for the people watching this or listening to this, of like, you know, what the work is, did the work change? Is it more of doing the same? Because of the quality of what the work was, or the quality of what the people bring to the work. Like, did any of that change? Did you get to like narrow your focus a little bit and like really focus on one aspect of being a senior designer, or was it still like this huge breadth of like all these things?
So it's like, in terms of work is always the same. I think the thing that really changes is what the expectation is of you, right? Because for all the places, the expectation has always been high, right? This was like, dude, we want you to come down here, we make awesome stuff, and then you do that. You know, I would say like this was the first time where someone's like, we see that you're really good at X, and you think you're not good at X, and push yourself in that direction, right? So that was the one thing that I did take I thought was very interesting, right? Because it's just like, given the fact that it's just like when you excel at something, right? People are just like, well, we wanted to see you excel at that. But it's rarely do people say like, you know what? Yeah, you excel at that, but and like, I'm sorry, I have to be kind of vague here on this.
Well, you're just saying like, why don't you try? Someone pushed you into trying something different.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
You know, and it's like, and so that was interesting. I was like, dude, I would have never known about this particular muscle that I had if that situation never manifested, right?
That's awesome.
So
that's pretty cool. Yeah, and I know Riot is like super secretive. So, but from your time at Riot, you're now at Microsoft Game Studios. We're back full circle. The initiative, you just started there, so congratulations. It's always fun to change career, you know, change your job and everything like that. So it's fun. What are some of the takeaways? You've already left us with so many gems. What are some of the takeaways or some of the things you would let people who are either students, enthusiasts, or maybe already in the industry still and looking for something different or looking to go into what you do as a senior designer, level designer, game designer? Like, what are some things that they should keep in mind? Like, are there any books they should be reading? Are there any conferences or anything they should be going to better prepare themselves for what this job is?
Yeah. So my big thing is this. I already stated one is play games. It's like, if you're not playing games, and don't just play just to check it off, but play and study it. It's just like when you decide, let's say, you know, oh, I'm gonna play Gears because I ain't never played Gears. Is what are you getting out of that experience, right? It's just like, what are you looking for? Are you looking to understand how cover shooting works? Are you looking to understand how they did all their encounter setups? You know, are you trying to understand how they actually approached narrative in our game? Go in there with a specific plan of what you want to try to extrapolate from it outside of just playing it. Because it's like, if you just play it, it can easily become disposable. You know, it's just like, I'm guilty of binge watching TV every once in a while, right? Is sometimes like I can't even recant the show I just watched. I gave it an hour's worth of my time. What did I take away from that? Nothing. Never let your studying of a game become that. So that's one.
That's cool. That's a cool way of thinking of it.
Yeah. Then two is then look at resources. Resources everywhere. It's just like GDC. I know is expensive, but it's like if you like find some way to get a vote and listen to those talks, or sometimes the talks are free. It's like look at that. It's just like for any time a developer blog comes on, listen to what they have to say. I know sometimes they dive deep, sometimes they don't, but anything that you can pull from those, just pull it. It's just like it's free. It's there. It's out there for you. It's just like grab it. Then practice, right? It's just like 'cause you can do those two things, but if you never practice on trying to design something or do the art, your skills can't evolve. It's just like there's no point to have head knowledge. Head knowledge is useless knowledge. And people are like, huh? What do you mean by that? It's just like gaining the knowledge of something, but then not applying it to anything doesn't create wisdom. And without that, all you have is foolishness. And it's just like, like, yeah, I know tons of people that are book smart, but are foolish, because they never taken that information, been able to apply it and learn why those things actually work and don't work. So that's why you got to sit there and you do the practice. So like I said, it's like get Unreal, get Unity, get whatever you can and just build something, right? And then let people play test it, right? It's like, don't just like you doing like, oh, this is dope, and when you get somebody to play test it, get somebody that's going to be honest, right? It's just like, hey, we love our friends, we love our families, but sometimes what they believe is our best interest is not our best interest, and that's being honest. It's just like, and some people like brutally honest. So it's like brutally honest to a point. Brutally honest just beat somebody down, that doesn't help them grow, right? That's not giving us stuff. But being
you
honest,
want someone that wants to that'll be honest with you, but maybe give you a little bit of insight of like why they feel that way.
Yeah, it's just so like you
can build from it.
Yeah, you want like a true critique. A true critique is, hey, you know what? Yeah, it's constructive. It's like I might think your whole thing is bad, but it's bad because of X. It's just like nothing's responsive.
Yeah, it's like things that you'll be able to address.
Yep. Exactly. So that's what you want during that time, right? Then the most important thing, even though it's like I already said, like, hey, if you're already doing, going in there, you're practicing and you're building stuff and getting out there, then the last little thing is like if you're not in the industry is apply. It's just like, hey, who cares if you get told no? It's just like keep working, keep getting better. It's like eventually that day is gonna come. And it's like, and if that day doesn't come, make that day come, because it's just like, hey, there's a lot of things where it's like I put my thing up on Steam, haha. So it's just like that. There's no such thing as no. There's no such thing as never. I remember this from Todd McFarlane actually. Was like I was watching a video, he was telling about like how he kept getting rejection letters. It's like, and he actually framed some of them, and it's just like, but he just refused to say no. Now it's just who doesn't know who Todd McFarlane is if you're in the comic book world, right? And it's like even people outside the comic book world know who Todd McFarlane is, right? So
that's awesome, man. Well, I think you have left us with a lot of gems, a lot of factual information, and it's been awesome. I learned a lot of things from talking to you today that I didn't even know from our other conversations. So I hope you guys are able to learn something new, and we'll be back again with another guest. Thank you very much, dude. I appreciate you taking the time.
Anytime.
It's awesome. All right. Awesome. Thanks.